Welcome to our channel, where real stories meet powerful emotions. Here, we bring you captivating tales of justice, courage, and the human spirit, all told with heart and meaning. Whether it's standing up against injustice, exposing hidden truths, or fighting for what's right, every video is designed to move you, inspire you, and keep you thinking long after it ends. If you believe in the power of truth and storytelling, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that matters. Now, let's dive into today's powerful journey. I never imagined that the security cameras around my backyard pool would become the most crucial witnesses in a scandal that shook our peaceful neighborhood to its core. But they did. What started as a seemingly simple decision to renovate an old, outdated pool quickly pulled me into a storm no one could have predicted. My name is Alyssa Grant, and I'm an architect who has spent over a decade building both my career and my home in Pine Grove Estates, a place long referred to as a countryside of stability and civility. But everything changed, and at the center of the chaos was Karen, the president of the HOA board, someone I never thought would enter my life in such a disruptive way. It all began last spring when I decided to renovate the pool in my backyard. The original design had aged poorly, echoing a dated 1990s aesthetic. After a tremendously successful year at my architecture firm, I felt it was time to transform my yard into a serene space worthy of the effort I had poured into my life and work. I followed every procedure by the book, submitted detailed plans, presented material samples, and even created a 3D model to help the board visualize the aesthetic harmony. Everything was clear, tasteful, and far from flashy, just a clean, modern upgrade. The approval meeting went more smoothly than I expected. 4 out of 5 board members agreed to move forward. The only dissenting vote came from one person, Karen. At the time, I thought a single opposing opinion wouldn't cause much trouble, but I was wrong, very wrong. During the meeting, Karen spent a full 15 minutes criticizing the pool's tile design as being too Mediterranean, claiming it clashed with the traditional American look of the neighborhood. I smiled politely, thinking she was just being overly particular. What I didn't realize was that, in that very moment, a quiet but relentless campaign to sabotage my project had already begun, a campaign in which I would soon find myself the prime target. At first, I believed it would all blow over. Even though Karen was the only one who voted against the project, I had the majority vote, and the renovation was officially approved. I signed a contract with the contractor and scheduled the work to begin early the following month. But just days after the schedule was announced, strange signs began to appear, and all of them bore a familiar signature, Karen. The first letter arrived on a Monday morning. It stated that my lawn exceeded the allowed height by 1/4 of an inch, a ridiculous claim, considering I had just mowed it over the weekend. Less than a week later came another warning, this time about my mailbox, supposedly lacking proper reflectivity. Then, yet another notice accused me of violating HOA rules by installing a video doorbell camera, even though the guidelines clearly stated it was permitted. Every one of these letters was signed by Karen, accompanied by a small smiley face at the end of her signature, an innocent-looking detail that made everything feel increasingly unsettling, and frankly, a bit sinister. Sensing something was off, I tried to address it directly. I invited Karen to review the plans again, offered to buy her coffee, and even suggested she check in on the project's progress whenever she liked. Her response? A smirk, followed by, "I don't associate with rule breakers." It sets a bad precedent. The irony, of course, was that Karen herself had once received board approval to plant a giant unicorn-shaped shrub in her front yard, something everyone in the neighborhood found peculiar, to say the least. That's when I realized this was no longer personal. It was a power struggle, a battle over control. And I, a woman who dared to modernize her home, who dared to choose a shade of green tile that didn't align with her so-called traditional values, had become a thorn in Karen's side. But what I didn't yet know was that the warning letters were just the beginning of a much deeper, far more dangerous plan. On the first day the construction crew arrived, I stepped into my backyard with a cup of hot coffee and a heart full of excitement. But when I looked across the street, I saw it. Karen's gleaming white SUV parked squarely in view, like a silent sentry monitoring every move. From her seat inside the vehicle, she lifted an iPad and began snapping photos of the site, swiping through screens and typing furiously, clearly on a mission. She made no attempt to hide her surveillance. In fact, she rolled down her window and smiled at me, a courteous, overly polished smile that sent a chill down my spine. But her presence didn't stop at long-distance monitoring. Every morning at exactly 8 a.m., Karen arrived like clockwork, following the same routine: park, open her notebook, and begin her self-appointed inspections, as if she were a licensed code enforcer. When I finally couldn't take it anymore, I walked up to her and asked, "Is there a problem, Karen?" She tilted her head, that syrupy smile plastered across her face, and said, "Oh, I'm just documenting potential violations for next month's meeting, Alyssa. Someone has to uphold community standards, don't you think?" I tried to remain calm. I even invited her in to view the construction progress, showed her the blueprints and the official approvals to assure her everything was in compliance. Her response? A cold remark. "I don't interact with rule breakers. It sets a bad precedent." Every word she uttered was sugar-coated but razor-sharp. And let's not forget, this was the same woman who once got approval for a nearly 6-foot topiary shaped like a unicorn planted smack in the middle of her front lawn. Then, just as the project neared completion, an urgent letter from the HOA landed in my mailbox with yet another absurd claim. The pool's depth signage uses an unapproved font. According to the letter, I was in violation of Section 7.3.2 of the HOA documentation, which, allegedly, required Times New Roman instead of Arial. I immediately combed through the entire guideline manual. That clause didn't exist. Fuming, I marched to Karen's house with the handbook in hand, ready to call out the nonsense. She opened the door in high-end athletic wear, holding a glass of white wine, despite it being barely past 11 a.m. When I pointed out the discrepancy, she replied with a straight face, "Oh, my copy is the President's edition. It includes appendices not yet distributed. Sometimes we have to exercise executive discretion, don't you agree?" In that moment, I knew this wasn't just about a pool renovation. I was up against an insidious abuse of power, one masked behind the facade of community protection, but in truth, wielded for personal control. And I could feel it in my gut. The real storm hadn't even begun. That night, I was working late in my home office when I heard a familiar sound, the slow, steady beep, beep of a truck reversing somewhere behind my house. At first, I thought it was the garbage truck running early, but the sound kept going, unnaturally long. Curious, I pulled up the security camera feed and my heart dropped. On the screen was a massive cement mixer truck, parked just beyond the fence line of my backyard, right next to my unfinished pool. But what shocked me even more was the person standing beside it, gesturing emphatically like a construction supervisor, Karen. Wearing designer athletic wear and her hair neatly tied up, she was directing two visibly confused workers, pointing repeatedly toward my pool. I grabbed my phone and rushed downstairs, my hands trembling with disbelief and rage. But before I could even step outside, the motion sensor floodlights suddenly turned on, triggering the high-definition recording system, a detail that would later become critical evidence in a scandal that rocked the entire city. Karen, completely absorbed in giving orders, didn't notice the unmarked police cruiser parked down the street on routine patrol that night. Nor did she realize she was standing directly on a temporary underground power line, clearly marked with fluorescent paint by the contractors. As I stepped into the backyard, I heard a firm voice call out, "Ma'am, I need to see a construction permit for this activity." Karen spun around, her face flashing pale for a split second before recovering with her trademark sugary smile. "Oh, thank goodness you're here. This is an emergency HOA intervention. We're addressing a public safety hazard," she said, pulling a sheet of paper from her jacket. The officer glanced at it, then frowned. "Ma'am, this appears to be a meeting summary with handwritten notes. This is not a valid permit, especially not for midnight construction on private property." I stepped forward, raising my phone. "I'm the homeowner. I did not authorize anything happening here, and I'm recording all of it." Both workers visibly exhaled in relief when they heard me speak. Without hesitation, they began packing up their equipment, despite Karen shouting behind them, threatening to sue them for violating a verbal contract. While she was frantically texting someone, a loud pop cracked through the air. The lights flickered. A sharp scent of burning plastic filled the air. Karen, dramatically pacing back and forth, had stepped directly on the temporary insulation casing. The entire block went dark. In that moment, I didn't know whether to be afraid, furious, or laugh. But one thing was clear. Karen had gone too far, and this time, there would be no turning back. Karen stood frozen in the dark, her face twisted under the flickering light of the backyard security lamp. She still tried to maintain her HOA president composure, stammering as she blamed the weather, the equipment. She even tried to blame me. But by that point, no one was listening anymore. Officer James Rowan, who had witnessed the entire scene, radioed for backup and immediately instructed Karen not to leave the premises. When the emergency crew and utility technicians arrived, they confirmed that the temporary underground power line had been physically damaged, causing a localized outage. The situation not only caused property damage to the neighborhood, but posed a serious risk of electrocution had any worker come in contact with the exposed cable. And amid all the chaos, Karen still tried to save face, making frantic phone calls and insisting, "This is a misunderstanding. It's an organized action. The HOA has jurisdiction." I stood in silence, but inside I was boiling. Every threatening letter, every absurd warning, every condescending glare from her, they all rushed back in that moment. But I didn't need to say a word. The truth was speaking for itself. When Officer Rowan asked everyone for identification, Karen turned her frustration on the workers. "If you walk away now, I'll sue your company. I paid triple for this late-night job under legitimate grounds." The two men didn't even respond. They quietly rolled the cement hose back onto the truck, relief visible on their faces, as if waking from a nightmare. I turned to the officer and said, "I recorded everything. My security cameras automatically store footage, and I have a backup of the video on my phone right here." He nodded and asked me to email it to his official address. I didn't just do that. I also attached every email from Karen, all the baseless warning letters, photos of her SUV parked outside my house every morning, and screenshots of her vague replies about the so-called president-only HOA guidelines. Officer Rowan calmly announced, "Ms. Karen, attempting to pour cement onto private property without the homeowner's consent and without a valid permit may constitute property damage and reckless endangerment." Karen's eyes widened. "You have no authority. This is an internal HOA matter." He replied, "I'm afraid tonight you've stepped far beyond those boundaries." Just then, power was restored to the neighborhood, and a stark white beam lit up Karen's face, no longer the face of a self-proclaimed community leader. What remained was a woman drunk on false authority, now exposed in front of neighbors, police officers, and the very workers she once commanded. What Karen didn't know was that a much bigger storm was looming, one that, in just a few hours, would unravel everything she had spent years trying to build. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight slipped through my curtains, I was already sitting in my attorney's office. What had happened the night before wasn't just simple vandalism. It had the markings of a coordinated scheme, and I needed someone with legal expertise to confirm that. Attorney Catherine Lang, a sharp, no-nonsense woman with eyes that missed nothing, sat silently for 20 minutes as I laid everything out. The videos, the emails, the notes. When I finished, she set her coffee cup down and said slowly, "Alyssa, I don't say this often, but I think it's time we contact the district attorney's office." While Catherine began drafting the formal report, I returned to attend an emergency HOA board meeting, called by the other members. Karen was noticeably absent. She had only sent a short text. Busy, unable to attend. But what she didn't anticipate was that I had already sent the board the full video footage from my security cameras, along with a timeline detailing weeks of harassment. When the footage began playing in front of the board, the room fell ice cold. Then quietly, a board member named Rebecca Lynn, the HOA's treasurer, placed a folder on the table. She spoke softly. "I've suspected something for months, and I think it's time everyone saw this." Inside were irregular financial statements, thousands of dollars in fines collected for petty violations, like mailbox height, grass length, even light fixture styles. But the part that shook the room Those funds never made it into the HOA's official account. Instead, the money was being routed into a private account under Karen's name and the authorized user, a name no one recognized, Franklin Rowe. Rebecca turned the page, her voice cracking slightly. Franklin Rowe is a real estate investor, and he's just purchased 5 homes in our neighborhood in the last 3 months. The room went still. The truth was out. Karen had been working with Franklin to deliberately devalue residents' properties by manufacturing violations, issuing inflated fines, and pushing homeowners into distress sales. Franklin would then swoop in, buy the homes at cut-rate prices, and had plans to demolish and replace them with luxury apartments. My pool, clean, modern, and increasing surrounding property value, was the one thing standing in their way. That's why Karen lost it when I refused to back down. Still reeling, I heard Rebecca add one more detail. And there's something else. Franklin is Karen's ex. They used to run an HOA together until it was dissolved in a financial scandal. There was no doubt anymore. This wasn't personal. This was organized fraud. That very afternoon, the district attorney's office officially accepted the case submitted by attorney Catherine Lang. Within 24 hours, a special investigative team was dispatched to Pine Grove Estates to uncover the truth. With an overwhelming amount of solid evidence, security footage, emails from the official HOA account, bank statements, and even unread messages from Franklin Rowe on Karen's phone, the case was swiftly classified as an organized real estate fraud scheme that crossed county lines. Karen began to unravel. Gone was the confident HOA president who constantly preached about community values. In her place was a panicked woman, avoiding everyone and refusing to cooperate, even with the remaining HOA board members. She barricaded herself in her home and, in a desperate attempt to stall the investigation, hired a high-profile attorney from the city, hoping to smother the case in layers of legal red tape. But this time, Karen had miscalculated. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, joined the case after uncovering financial ties between Karen and Franklin that spanned multiple states, with previous allegations of money laundering through real estate in several other residential communities. Most damning of all, every email, detailing sale agreements, instructions to inflate fines, and strategies to squeeze homeowners, had been sent from the official HOA email account, making every piece of evidence both admissible and irrefutable. A search warrant was issued. Karen's home was sealed off, her personal computer, phone, and physical documents seized. Reporters from local news stations swarmed the neighborhood, and soon the story, dubbed Cementgate, dominated the evening broadcasts. Footage of Karen, hand-shielding her face as she stepped into a police cruiser, became a symbol of the fall of a suburban tyrant. I stood quietly on my front porch, watching the FBI drive away with boxes of files stamped with red seals, and felt an odd, liberating sense of relief. Justice had finally begun to speak. But what I didn't know was this: the events about to unfold in the first court hearing would leave everyone more stunned than ever before. Karen Whitmore's first court hearing drew unprecedented attention in the history of Pine Grove Estates. People lined up outside the courthouse at dawn, carrying printed screenshots from security footage, absurd violation letters, and fine notices they had once silently paid in frustration. When Karen entered the courtroom, still dressed in an expensive suit and wearing a forced smile, the room fell completely silent. It was as if everyone was waiting for the moment her mask of authority would finally be stripped away. But Karen was no longer in control. As the prosecutor read out the list of charges, fraud, conspiracy to commit property theft, destruction of private property, abuse of power, and obstruction of a federal investigation, I watched her smile crack bit by bit, like foundation peeling under harsh courtroom lighting. Her attorney attempted to negotiate, claiming Karen had only acted to protect community values and had been influenced by someone with stronger financial power. But then came the key piece of evidence: the full chain of emails between Karen and Franklin Rowe. The messages outlined in disturbing detail their plan to manipulate the housing market and included lines like, "She, Alyssa, is the last domino. If we make her quit, the rest will fall." A wave of whispers rippled through the courtroom. I could feel the anger and heartbreak in the eyes of dozens of neighbors, people who once believed in a fair system, only to realize they'd been pawns in a soulless profit scheme. In the end, Karen was sentenced to 2 years in prison, 5 years of probation, full restitution of all unlawfully collected funds, and a lifetime ban from serving on any HOA board in the country. Franklin Rowe received a harsher sentence after his plea deal was rejected due to failure to disclose multiple property assets tied to the fraud. As for us, the residents of Pine Grove, we didn't let the story end there. A new HOA board was elected, led by Linda Chen, a brave woman who once said, "An HOA is meant to serve the community, not rule over it." All bylaws were rewritten with input from residents. Finances became fully transparent, and any fines now required a community vote. And my pool? It was finally completed, with the original Mediterranean green tiles, fully and officially approved. I hosted a huge pool party to thank everyone. As laughter filled the air, Mrs. Chen raised her glass and said, "Let's toast to Alyssa, not only for saving her pool, but for restoring justice to our entire neighborhood." I smiled. And in a moment of lighthearted humor, someone suggested installing a small sign beside the water. "This pool survived cement, power, and Karen." And I thought, nothing could be more true. The story of Alyssa Grant and the midnight cement incident at Pine Grove Estates was never just a personal dispute within a neighborhood. Beneath the drama and gripping twists lies a series of profound lessons about justice, perseverance, and the power of a single individual who dares to stand up against injustice. First and foremost, the story underscores a critical truth. Unchecked power inevitably leads to abuse. Karen, acting as HOA president, used the guise of protecting the community to justify judging, punishing, and manipulating the lives of others. It's a vital reminder that any system, whether it's a sprawling institution or a simple neighborhood board, must be bound by transparency, oversight, and limits. Without these, it can easily become a tool for personal gain. Second, this story is undeniable proof that an ordinary person can bring about extraordinary change. Alyssa wasn't a politician, nor a public figure, but she had 3 crucial things: the truth, persistence, and an unshakable will. Despite being watched, harassed through letters, and nearly having her property sabotaged in the dead of night, she stood firm in her principles and chose the legal path to fight injustice. The result? She didn't just save her pool, a symbol of personal freedom, but also helped expose a larger scheme and sparked a transformation in how the HOA operated. The story also highlights the power of technology and documentation. Had Alyssa not installed security cameras, had she not diligently recorded the evidence, justice might never have been served. In today's world, legally capturing and preserving information is no longer just a form of self-protection. It's a tool for defending truth. Finally, this story poses a question for all of us. When we witness injustice, will we stay silent or speak up? Mrs. Chen, a neighbor who had remained quiet for years, chose to change. She became the leader of a new, fair, and transparent HOA. The community stood with Alyssa once they saw the truth. Real change didn't come from one lone voice. It came from a community awakened by the courage of one person brave enough to step forward first. Whether you live in a small neighborhood or a bustling city, whether you're just starting out or well into life's journey, this story is a powerful reminder. Justice begins with courage, and change begins with you. If you too feel outraged by the abuse of power shown by people like Karen, those who hide behind the guise of protecting the community to manipulate, intimidate, and exploit for personal gain, then help us spread this story. Click like if you believe no one should ever be bullied in their own home. Share this video so others know that no matter how powerful or cunning the opposition may be, truth and justice will always prevail. And don't forget to subscribe, because there are many more real stories waiting to be uncovered. Stories where the good refuse to stay silent, and the corrupt can no longer hide. Thank you for watching and standing with us. Let's protect justice, starting with the smallest acts that make the biggest difference. Disclaimer. The content presented in this video is intended solely for entertainment, educational purposes, and to convey social messages for general reference. The story, characters, and events depicted are fictional and dramatized, based on common real-life themes often found in residential communities across the United States, particularly those involving neighborhood governance, privacy rights, and social justice. Any resemblance to actual persons, organizations, or events is purely coincidental and unintentional. We do not encourage or promote any form of confrontation, legal infringement, or the unauthorized use of personal images or information. All real-life matters should be addressed through proper legal channels with professional legal guidance. This video does not constitute legal, financial, or personal advice. Viewers are encouraged to exercise independent judgment and seek expert counsel when making decisions related to similar real-life situations. We sincerely thank you for your support and hope this video helps raise awareness about justice, individual rights, and the importance of collective responsibility within our communities.